Selected works of Mao Zedong. Rectify the party's style of work. February 1, 1942. This speech was delivered by Comrade Mao Zedong at the opening of the Party School of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. The Party School opens today and I wish it every success. I would like to say something about the problem of our party's style of work. Why must there be a revolutionary party? There must be a revolutionary party because the world contains enemies who oppress the people and the people want to throw off enemy oppression. In the era of capitalism and imperialism, just such a revolutionary party as the Communist Party is needed. Without such a party it is simply impossible for the people to throw off enemy oppression. We are communists, we want to lead the people in overthrowing the enemy, and so we must keep our ranks in good order, we must march in step. Our troops must be picked troops and our weapons good weapons. Without these conditions the enemy cannot be overthrown. What is the problem now facing our party? The general line of the party is correct and presents no problem, and the party's work has been fruitful. The party has several 100,000 members who are leading the people in extremely hard and bitter struggles against the enemy. This is plain to everybody and beyond all doubt. Then is there or is there not any problem still facing our party? I say there is and, in a certain sense, the problem is quite serious. What is the problem? It is the fact that there is something in the minds of a number of our comrades which strikes one as not quite right, not quite proper. In other words, there is still something wrong with our style of study, with our style in the party's internal and external relations and with our style of writing. By something wrong with the style of study we mean the malady of subjectivism. By something wrong with our style and party relations we mean the malady of sectarianism. By something wrong with the style of writing we mean the malady of stereotyped party writing. All these are wrong, they are ill winds, but they are not like the wintry north winds that sweep across the whole sky. Subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing are no longer the dominant styles, but merely gusts of contrary wind, ill winds from the air raid tunnels, laughter. It is bad, however, that such winds should still be blowing in the party. We must seal off the passages which produce them. Our whole party should undertake the job of sealing off these passages, and so should the party school. These three ill winds, subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing, have their historical origins. Although no longer dominant in the whole party, they still constantly create trouble and assail us. Therefore, it is necessary to resist them and to study, analyze, and elucidate them. Fight subjectivism in order to rectify the style of study, fight sectarianism in order to rectify the style and party relations, and fight party stereotypes in order to rectify the style of writing. Such is the task before us. To accomplish the task of overthrowing the enemy, we must accomplish the task of rectifying these styles within the party. The style of study and the style of writing are also the party's style of work. Once our party's style of work is put completely right, the people all over the country will learn from our example. Those outside the party who have the same kind of bad style will, if they are good and honest people, learn from our example and correct their mistakes, and thus the whole nation will be influenced. So long as our communist ranks are in good order and march in step, so long as our troops are picked troops and our weapons are good weapons, any enemy, however powerful, can be overthrown. Let me speak now about subjectivism. Subjectivism is an improper style of study, it is opposed to Marxism Leninism and is incompatible with the Communist Party. What we want is the Marxist-Leninist style of study. What we call style of study means not just style of study in the schools but in the whole party. It is a question of the method of thinking of comrades in our leading bodies, of all cotters and party members, a question of our attitude towards Marxism-Leninism, of the attitude of all party comrades in their work. As such, it is a question of extraordinary, indeed of primary, importance. Certain muddled ideas find currency among many people. There are, for instance, muddled ideas about what is a theorist, what is an intellectual and what is meant by linking theory and practice. Let us first ask, is the theoretical level of our party high or low? Recently more Marxist-Leninist works have been translated and more people have been reading them. That is a very good thing. But can we therefore say that the theoretical level of our party has been greatly raised? True, the level is now somewhat higher than before. But our theoretical front is very much out of harmony with the rich content of the Chinese revolutionary movement, and a comparison of the two shows that the theoretical side is lagging far behind. Generally speaking, our theory cannot as yet keep pace with our revolutionary practice, let alone lead the way as it should. We have not yet raised our rich and varied practice to the proper theoretical plane. We have not yet examined all the problems of revolutionary practice or even the important ones and raised them to a theoretical plane. Just think, how many of us have created theories worthy of the name on China's economics, politics, military affairs, or culture, theories which can be regarded as scientific and comprehensive, and not crude and sketchy? Especially in the field of economic theory, Chinese capitalism has had a century of development since the Opium War, and yet not a single theoretical work has been produced which accords with the realities of China's economic development and is genuinely scientific. Can we say that in the study of China's economic problems, for instance, the theoretical level is already high? Can we say that our party already has economic theorists worthy of the name? Certainly not. We have read a great many Marxist-Leninist books, but can we claim, then, that we have theorists? We cannot. For Marxism-Leninism is the theory created by Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin on the basis of practice, their general conclusion drawn from historical and revolutionary reality. If we merely read their works but do not proceed to study the realities of China's history and revolution in the light of their theory or do not make any effort to think through China's revolutionary practice carefully in terms of theory, we should not be so presumptuous as to call ourselves Marxist theorists. Our achievements on the theoretical front will be very poor indeed if, as members of the Communist Party of China, we close our eyes to China's problems and can only memorize isolated conclusions or principles from Marxist writings. If all a person can do is to commit Marxist economics or philosophy to memory, reciting glibly from chapter I to chapter X, but is utterly unable to apply them, can he be considered a Marxist theorist? No. He cannot. What kind of theorists do we want? We want theorists who can, in accordance with the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint and method, correctly interpret the practical problems arising in the course of history and revolution and give scientific explanations and theoretical elucidations of China's economic, political, military, cultural, and other problems. Such are the theorists we want. To be a theorist of this kind, a person must have a true grasp of the essence of Marxism-Leninism, of the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint and method and of the theories of Lenin and Stalin on the colonial revolution and the Chinese Revolution, and he must be able to apply them in a penetrating and scientific analysis of China's practical problems and discover the laws of development of these problems. Such are the theorists we really need. The Central Committee of our party has now made a decision calling upon our comrades to learn how to apply the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint and method in the serious study of China's history, and of China's economics, politics, military affairs, and culture, and to analyze every problem concretely on the basis of detailed material and then draw theoretical conclusions. This is the responsibility we must shoulder. Our comrades in the party school should not regard Marxist theory as lifeless dogma. It is necessary to master Marxist theory and apply it, master it for the sole purpose of applying it. If you can apply the Marxist-Leninist viewpoint in elucidating one or two practical problems, you should be commended and credited with some achievement. The more problems you elucidate and the more comprehensively and profoundly you do so, the greater will be your achievement. Our party school should also lay down the rule to grade students good or poor according to how they look at China's problems after they have studied Marxism-Leninism, according to whether or not they see the problems clearly and whether or not they see them at all. Next, let us talk about the question of the intellectuals. Since China is a semi-colonial, semi-feudal country and her culture is not well developed, intellectuals are particularly treasured. On this question of the intellectuals, the Central Committee of the party made the decision over 2 years ago that we should win over the great numbers of intellectuals and, insofar as they are revolutionary and willing to take part in the resistance to Japan, welcome them one and all. It is entirely right for us to esteem intellectuals, for without revolutionary intellectuals the revolution cannot triumph. But we all know there are many intellectuals who fancy themselves very learned and assume airs of erudition without realizing that such airs are bad and harmful and hinder their own progress. They ought to be aware of the truth that actually many so-called intellectuals are, relatively speaking, most ignorant, and the workers and peasants sometimes know more than they do. Here some will say, "Ha! You are turning things upside down and talking nonsense." Laughter. But, comrades, don't get excited, there is some sense in what I am saying. What is knowledge? Ever since class society came into being, the world has had only two kinds of knowledge: knowledge of the struggle for production and knowledge of the class struggle. Natural science and social science are the crystallization of these two kinds of knowledge, and philosophy is the generalization and summation of the knowledge of nature and the knowledge of society. Is there any other kind of knowledge? No. Now let us take a look at certain students, those brought up in schools that are completely cut off from the practical activities of society. What about them? A person goes from a primary school of this kind all the way through to a university of the same kind, graduates, and is reckoned to have a stock of learning. But all he has is book learning. He has not yet taken part in any practical activities or applied what he has learned to any field of life. Can such a person be regarded as a completely developed intellectual? Hardly so, in my opinion, because his knowledge is still incomplete. What then is relatively complete knowledge? All relatively complete knowledge is formed in two stages. The first stage is perceptual knowledge, the second is rational knowledge, the latter being the development of the former to a higher stage. What sort of knowledge is the student's book learning? Even supposing all their knowledge is truth, it is still not knowledge acquired through their own personal experience, but consists of theories set down by their predecessors in summarizing experience of the struggle for production and of the class struggle. It is entirely necessary that students should acquire this kind of knowledge, but it must be understood that as far as they are concerned, such knowledge is in a sense still one-sided, something which has been verified by others but not yet by themselves. What is most important is to be good at applying this knowledge in life and in practice. Therefore, I advise those who have only book learning but as yet no contact with reality, and also those with little practical experience, to realize their own shortcomings and become a little more modest. How can those who have only book learning be turned into intellectuals in the true sense? The only way is to get them to take part in practical work and become practical workers, to get those engaged in theoretical work to study important practical problems. In this way our aim can be attained. What I have said will probably make some people angry. They will say, according to your explanation, even Marx would not be regarded as an intellectual. I say they are wrong. Marx took part in the practice of the revolutionary movement and also created revolutionary theory. Beginning with the commodity, the simplest element of capitalism, he made a thorough study of the economic structure of capitalist society. Millions of people saw and handled commodities every day but were so used to them that they took no notice. Marx alone studied commodities scientifically. He carried out a tremendous work of research into their actual development and derived a thoroughly scientific theory from what existed universally. He studied nature, history, and proletarian revolution and created dialectical materialism, historical materialism and the theory of proletarian revolution. Thus Marx became a most completely developed intellectual, representing the acme of human wisdom. He was fundamentally different from those who have only book learning. Marx undertook detailed investigations and studies in the course of practical struggles, formed generalizations and then verified his conclusions by testing them in practical struggles. This is what we call theoretical work. Our party needs a large number of comrades who will learn how to do such work. In our party there are many comrades who can learn to do this kind of theoretical research. Most of them are intelligent and promising and we should value them. But they must follow correct principles and not repeat the mistake of the past. They must discard dogmatism and not confine themselves to ready-made phrases in books. There is only one kind of true theory in this world, theory that is drawn from objective reality and then verified by objective reality. Nothing else is worthy of the name of theory in our sense. Stalin said that theory becomes aimless when it is not connected with practice. Aimless theory is useless and false and should be discarded. We should point the finger of scorn at those who are fond of aimless theorizing. Marxism Leninism is the most correct, scientific and revolutionary truth, born out of and verified by objective reality, but many who study Marxism Leninism take it as lifeless dogma, thus impeding the development of theory and harming themselves as well as other comrades. On the other hand, our comrades who are engaged in practical work will also come to grief if they misuse their experience. True, these people are often rich in experience, which is very valuable, but it is very dangerous if they rest content with their own experience. They must realize that their knowledge is mostly perceptual and partial and that they lack rational and comprehensive knowledge. In other words, they lack theory and their knowledge, too, is relatively incomplete. Without comparatively complete knowledge it is impossible to do revolutionary work well. Thus, there are two kinds of incomplete knowledge, one is ready-made knowledge found in books and the other is knowledge that is mostly perceptual and partial, both are one-sided. Only an integration of the two can yield knowledge that is sound and relatively complete. In order to study theory, however, our cotters of working class and peasant origin must first acquire an elementary education. Without it they cannot learn Marxist-Leninist theory. Having acquired it, they can study Marxism-Leninism at any time. In my childhood I never attended a Marxist-Leninist school and was taught only such things as, the master said, how pleasant it is to learn and constantly review what one has learned. For though this teaching material was antiquated, it did me some good because from it I learned to read. Nowadays we no longer study the Confucian classics but such new subjects as modern Chinese, history, geography and elementary natural science, which, once learned, are useful everywhere. The Central Committee of our party now emphatically requires that our cotters of working class and peasant origin should obtain an elementary education because they can then take up any branch of study politics, military science or economics. Otherwise, for all their rich experience they will never be able to study theory. It follows that to combat subjectivism we must enable people of each of these two types to develop in whichever direction they are deficient and to merge with the other type. Those with book learning must develop in the direction of practice. It is only in this way that they will stop being content with books and avoid committing dogmatist errors. Those experienced in work must take up the study of theory and must read seriously, only then will they be able to systematize and synthesize their experience and raise it to the level of theory. Only then will they not mistake their partial experience for universal truth and not commit empiricist errors. Dogmatism and empiricism alike are subjectivism, each originating from an opposite pole. Hence there are two kinds of subjectivism in our party, dogmatism and empiricism. Each sees only a part and not the whole. If people are not on guard, do not realize that such one-sidedness is a shortcoming and do not strive to overcome it, they are liable to go astray. However, of the two kinds of subjectivism, dogmatism is still the greater danger in our party. For dogmatists can easily assume a Marxist guise to bluff, capture and make servitors of cotters of working class and peasant origin who cannot easily see through them. They can also bluff and ensnare the naive youth. If we overcome dogmatism, cotters with book learning will readily join with those who have experience and will take to the study of practical things, and then many good cotters who integrate theory with experience, as well as some real theorists, will emerge. If we overcome dogmatism, the comrades with practical experience will have good teachers to help them raise their experience to the level of theory and so avoid empiricist errors. Besides muddled ideas about the theorist and the intellectual, there is a muddled idea among many comrades about linking theory and practice, a phrase they have on their lips every day. They talk constantly about linking, but actually they mean separating, because they make no effort at linking. How is Marxist-Leninist theory to be linked with the practice of the Chinese Revolution? To use a common expression, it is by shooting the arrow at the target. As the arrow is to the target, so is Marxism-Leninism to the Chinese Revolution. Some comrades, however, are shooting without a target, shooting at random, and such people are liable to harm the revolution. Others merely stroke the arrow fondly, exclaiming, "What a fine arrow! What a fine arrow," but never want to shoot it. These people are only connoisseurs of curios and have virtually nothing to do with the revolution. The arrow of Marxism-Leninism must be used to shoot at the target of the Chinese Revolution. Unless this point is made clear, the theoretical level of our party can never be raised and the Chinese Revolution can never be victorious. Our comrades must understand that we study Marxism-Leninism not for display, nor because there is any mystery about it, but solely because it is the science which leads the revolutionary cause of the proletariat to victory. Even now, there are not a few people who still regard odd quotations from Marxist-Leninist works as a ready-made panacea which, once acquired, can easily cure all maladies. These people show childish ignorance, and we should enlighten them. It is precisely such ignorant people who take Marxism-Leninism as a religious dogma. To them we should say bluntly, your dogma is worthless. Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin have repeatedly stated that our theory is not a dogma but a guide to action. But such people prefer to forget this statement, which is of the greatest, indeed the utmost, importance. Chinese communists can be regarded as linking theory with practice only when they become good at applying the Marxist-Leninist stand, viewpoint and method and the teachings of Lenin and Stalin concerning the Chinese Revolution, and when, furthermore, through serious research into the realities of China's history and revolution, they do creative theoretical work to meet China's needs in different spheres. Merely talking about linking theory and practice without actually doing anything about it is of no use, even if one goes on talking for 100 years. To oppose the subjectivist, one-sided approach to problems, we must demolish dogmatist subjectiveness and one-sidedness. So much for today about combating subjectivism in order to rectify the style of study throughout the party. Let me now speak about the question of sectarianism. Having been steeled for 20 years, our party is no longer dominated by sectarianism. Remnants of sectarianism, however, are still found both in the party's internal relations and in its external relations. Sectarian tendencies in internal relations lead to exclusiveness towards comrades inside the party and hinder inter-party unity and solidarity, while sectarian tendencies in external relations lead to exclusiveness towards people outside the party and hinder the party in its task of uniting the whole people. Only by uprooting this evil in both its aspects can the party advance unimpeded in its great task of achieving unity among all party comrades and among all the people of our country. What are the remnants of inter-party sectarianism? They are mainly as follows. First, the assertion of independence. Some comrades see only the interests of the part and not the whole. They always put undue stress on that part of the work for which they themselves are responsible and always wish to subordinate the interests of the whole to the interests of their own part. They do not understand the party's system of democratic centralism. They do not realize that the Communist Party not only needs democracy but needs centralization even more. They forget the system of democratic centralism in which the minority is subordinate to the majority, the lower level to the higher level, the part to the whole and the entire membership to the Central Committee. Chiang Kuo-tao V asserted his independence of the Central Committee of the party and as a result asserted himself into betraying the party and became a Kuomintang agent. Although the sectarianism we are now discussing is not of this extremely serious kind, it must still be guarded against and we must do away completely with all manifestations of disunity. We should encourage comrades to take the interests of the whole into account. Every party member, every branch of work, every statement and every action must proceed from the interests of the whole party. It is absolutely impermissible to violate this principle. Those who assert this kind of independence are usually wedded to the doctrine of me first and are generally wrong on the question of the relationship between the individual and the party. Although in words they profess respect for the party, in practice they put themselves first and the party second. What are these people after? They are after fame and position and want to be in the limelight. Whenever they are put in charge of a branch of work, they assert their independence. With this aim, they draw some people in, push others out and resort to boasting, flattery, and touting among the comrades, thus importing the vulgar style of the bourgeois political parties into the Communist Party. It is their dishonesty that causes them to come to grief. I believe we should do things honestly, for without an honest attitude it is absolutely impossible to accomplish anything in this world. Which are the honest people? Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin are honest, men of science are honest. Which are the dishonest people? Trotsky, Bukharin, Chen Tuxiu and Chiang Kuo-tao are extremely dishonest, and those who assert independence out of personal or sectional interest are dishonest too. All sly people, all those who do not have a scientific attitude in their work, fancy themselves resourceful and clever, but in fact they are most stupid and will come to no good. Students in our party school must pay attention to this problem. We must build a centralized, unified party and make a clean sweep of all unprincipled factional struggles. We must combat individualism and sectarianism so as to enable our whole party to march in step and fight for one common goal. Cotters from the outside and those from the locality must unite and combat sectarian tendencies. Very careful attention must be given to the relations between outside and local cotters because many anti-Japanese base areas were established only after the arrival of the 8th Route Army or the new 4th Army, and much of the local work developed only after the arrival of outside cotters. Our comrades must understand that in these conditions it is possible for our base areas to be consolidated and for our party to take root there only when the two kinds of cotters unite as one and when a large number of local cotters develop and are promoted. Otherwise it is impossible. Both the outside and the local cotters have their strong and weak points, and to make any progress they must overcome their own weak points by learning from each other's strong points. The outside cotters are generally not up to the local cotters in familiarity with local conditions and links with the masses. Take me for instance. Although I have been in northern Shenzi 5 or 6 years, I am far behind the local comrades in understanding local conditions and in links with the people here. Our comrades going to the anti-Japanese base areas in Shenzi, Hopi, Shantung and other provinces must pay attention to this. Moreover, even within the same base area, owing to the fact that some districts develop earlier and others later, there is a difference between the local cotters of a district and those from outside it. Cotters who come from a more developed to a less developed district are also outside cotters in relation to that locality, and they, too, should pay great attention to fostering and helping local cotters. Generally speaking, in places where outside cotters are in charge, it is they who should bear the main responsibility if their relations with the local cotters are not good. And the chief comrades in charge should bear greater responsibility. The attention paid to this problem in some places is still very inadequate. Some people look down on the local cotters and ridicule them, saying, "What do these locals know? Clodhoppers." Such people utterly fail to understand the importance of local cotters. They know neither the latter's strong points nor their own weaknesses and adopt an incorrect, sectarian attitude. All outside cotters must cherish the local cotters and give them constant help and must not be permitted to ridicule or attack them. Of course, the local cotters on their part must learn from the strong points of the outside cotters and rid themselves of inappropriate, narrow views so that they and the outside cotters become as one, with no distinction between them and us, and thus avoid sectarian tendencies. The same applies to the relationship between cotters in army service and other cotters working in the locality. They must be completely united and must oppose sectarian tendencies. The army cotters must help the local cotters, and vice versa. If there is friction between them, each should make allowance for the other and carry out proper self-criticism. Generally speaking, in places where army cotters are actually in positions of leadership, it is they who should bear the main responsibility if their relations with the local cotters are not good. Only when the army cotters understand their own responsibility and are modest in their attitude towards the local cotters can the conditions be created for the smooth progress of our war effort and our work of construction in the base areas. The same applies to the relationship among different army units, different localities, and different departments. We must oppose the tendency towards selfish departmentalism by which the interests of one's own unit are looked after to the exclusion of those of others. Whoever is indifferent to the difficulties of others, refuses to transfer cotters to other units on request, or releases only the inferior ones, using the neighbor's field as an outlet for his overflow, and does not give the slightest consideration to other departments, localities, or people. Such a person is a selfish departmentalist who has entirely lost the spirit of communism. Lack of consideration for the whole and complete indifference to other departments, localities, and people are characteristics of a selfish departmentalist. We must intensify our efforts to educate such persons and to make them understand that selfish departmentalism is a sectarian tendency which will become very dangerous, if allowed to develop. Another problem is the relationship between old and new cotters. Since the beginning of the War of Resistance, our party has grown enormously, and large numbers of new cotters have emerged. That is a very good thing. In his report to the 18th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Comrade Stalin said, "There are never enough old cotters, there are far less than required, and they are already partly going out of commission owing to the operation of the laws of nature." Here he was discussing the cotters' situation and not only the laws of nature. If our party does not have a great many new cotters working in unity and cooperation with the old cotters, our cause will come to a stop. All old cotters, therefore, should welcome the new ones with the utmost enthusiasm and show them the warmest solicitude. True, new cotters have their shortcomings. They have not been long in the revolution and lack experience, and unavoidably some have brought with them vestiges of the unwholesome ideology of the old society, remnants of the ideology of petty bourgeois individualism. But such shortcomings can be gradually eliminated through education and tempering in the revolution. The strong point of the new cotters, as Stalin has said, is that they are acutely sensitive to what is new and are therefore enthusiastic and active to a high degree, the very qualities which some of the old cotters lack. 6 cotters, new and old, should respect each other, learn from each other and overcome their own shortcomings by learning from each other's strong points, so as to unite as one in the common cause and guard against sectarian tendencies. Generally speaking, in places where the old cotters are mainly in charge, it is they who should bear the chief responsibility if relations with the new cotters are not good. All the above relations between the part and the whole, relations between the individual and the party, relations between outside and local cotters, relations between army cotters and other cotters working in the locality, relations between this and that army unit, between this and that locality, between this and that department, and relations between old and new cotters are relations within the party. In all these relations it is necessary to enhance the spirit of communism and guard against sectarian tendencies, so that the ranks of our party will be in good order, march in step and therefore fight well. This is a very important problem which we must solve thoroughly in rectifying the party's style of work. Sectarianism is an expression of subjectivism in organizational relations. If we want to get rid of subjectivism and promote the Marxist-Leninist spirit of seeking truth from facts, we must sweep the remnants of sectarianism out of the party and proceed from the principle that the party's interests are above personal or sectional interests, so that the party can attain complete solidarity and unity. The remnants of sectarianism must be eliminated from the party's external as well as its internal relations. The reason is this: we cannot defeat the enemy by merely uniting the comrades throughout the party, we can defeat the enemy only by uniting the people throughout the country. For 20 years the Communist Party of China has done great and arduous work in the cause of uniting the people of the whole country, and the achievements in this work since the outbreak of the War of Resistance are even greater than in the past. This does not mean, however, that all our comrades already have a correct style in dealing with the masses and are free from sectarian tendencies. No. In fact, sectarian tendencies still exist among a number of comrades, and in some cases to a very serious degree. Many of our comrades tend to be overbearing in their relations with non-party people, look down upon them, despise or refuse to respect them or appreciate their strong points. This is indeed a sectarian tendency. After reading a few Marxist books, such comrades become more arrogant instead of more modest, and invariably dismiss others as no good without realizing that in fact their own knowledge is only half-baked. Our comrades must realize the truth that Communist Party members are at all times a minority as compared with non-party people. Supposing 1 out of every 100 persons were a communist, then there would be 4,500,000 communists among China's population of 450 million. Yet, even if our membership reached this huge figure, communists would still form only 1% of the whole population, while 99% would be non-party people. What reason can we then have for not cooperating with non-party people? As regards all those who wish to cooperate with us or might cooperate with us, we have only the duty of cooperating and absolutely no right to shut them out. But some party members do not understand this and look down upon, or even shut out, those who wish to cooperate with us. There are no grounds whatsoever for doing so. Have Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin given us any grounds? They have not. On the contrary, they have always earnestly enjoined us to form close ties with the masses and not divorce ourselves from them. Or has the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China given us any grounds? No. Among all its resolutions there is not a single one that says we may divorce ourselves from the masses and so isolate ourselves. On the contrary, the Central Committee has always told us to form close ties with the masses and not to divorce ourselves from them. Thus any action divorcing us from the masses has no justification at all and is simply the mischievous result of the sectarian ideas some of our comrades have themselves concocted. As such, sectarianism remains very serious among some of our comrades and still obstructs the application of the party line. We should carry out extensive education within the party to meet this problem. Above all, we should make our cotters really understand how serious the problem is and how utterly impossible it is to overthrow the enemy and attain the goal of the revolution unless party members unite with the non-party cotters and with non-party people. All sectarian ideas are subjectivist and are incompatible with the real needs of the revolution, hence the struggle against sectarianism and the struggle against subjectivism should go on simultaneously. There is no time today to talk about the question of stereotyped party writing. I shall discuss it at another meeting. Stereotyped party writing is a vehicle for filth, a form of expression for subjectivism and sectarianism. It does people harm and damages the revolution, and we must get rid of it completely. To combat subjectivism we must propagate materialism and dialectics. However, there are many comrades in our party who lay no stress on the propaganda either of materialism or of dialectics. Some tolerate subjectivist propaganda and regard it with equanimity. They think they believe in Marxism, but make no effort to propagate materialism and do not give it a thought or express any opinion when they hear or read subjectivist stuff. This is not the attitude of a communist. It allows many of our comrades to be poisoned by subjectivist ideas, which numb their sensitivity. We should therefore launch a campaign of enlightenment within the party to free the minds of our comrades from the fog of subjectivism and dogmatism and should call upon them to boycott subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing. Such evils are like Japanese goods, for only our enemy wishes us to preserve them and continue to befuddle ourselves with them, so we should advocate a boycott against them, just as we boycott Japanese goods. 7. We should boycott all the wares of subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing, make their sale difficult, and not allow their purveyors to ply their trade by exploiting the low theoretical level in the party. Our comrades must develop a good nose for this purpose. They should take a sniff at everything and distinguish the good from the bad before they decide whether to welcome it or boycott it. Communists must always go into the whys and wherefores of anything, use their own heads and carefully think over whether or not it corresponds to reality and is really well-founded. On no account should they follow blindly and encourage slavishness. Finally, in opposing subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing we must have in mind two purposes: first, learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones, and second, cure the sickness to save the patient. The mistakes of the past must be exposed without sparing anyone's sensibilities. It is necessary to analyze and criticize what was bad in the past with a scientific attitude so that work in the future will be done more carefully and done better. This is what is meant by learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. But our aim in exposing errors and criticizing shortcomings, like that of a doctor curing a sickness, is solely to save the patient and not to doctor him to death. A person with appendicitis is saved when the surgeon removes his appendix. So long as a person who has made mistakes does not hide his sickness for fear of treatment or persist in his mistakes until he is beyond cure, so long as he honestly and sincerely wishes to be cured and to mend his ways, we should welcome him and cure his sickness so that he can become a good comrade. We can never succeed if we just let ourselves go, and lash out at him. In treating an ideological or a political malady, one must never be rough and rash but must adopt the approach of curing the sickness to save the patient, which is the only correct and effective method. I have taken this occasion of the opening of the party school to speak at length, and I hope comrades will think over what I have said. Enthusiastic applause. Notes 1. Stereotyped writing, or the eight-legged essay, was the special form of essay prescribed in the imperial examinations under China's feudal dynasties from the 15th to the 19th centuries. It consisted in juggling with words, concentrated only on form and was devoid of content. Structurally, the main body of the essay had 8 parts: presentation, amplification, preliminary exposition, initial argument, inceptive paragraphs, middle paragraphs, rear paragraphs and concluding paragraphs, and the 5th to 8th parts each had to have 2 legs, i.e., 2 antithetical paragraphs, hence the name eight-legged essay. The eight-legged essay became a byword in China denoting stereotyped formalism and triteness. thus stereotyped party writing, characterizes the writings of certain people in the revolutionary ranks who piled up revolutionary phrases and terms higgledy-piggledy instead of analyzing the facts. Like the eight-legged essay, their writings were nothing but verbiage. This was the decision on recruiting intellectuals adopted by the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China in December 1939, which is printed under the title Recruit Large Numbers of Intellectuals in the Selected Works of Mao Zedong, Volume 2. 3. CJV Stalin, The Foundations of Leninism, Problems of Leninism, ENG ed., FLPH Moscow, 1954. p. 31. 4. This is the opening sentence of the Confucian Analects, a record of the dialogues of Confucius and his disciples. 5. Chang Kuo-tao was a renegade from the Chinese Revolution. In early life, speculating on the revolution, he joined the Chinese Communist Party. In the party he made many mistakes resulting in serious crimes. The most notorious of these was his opposition in 1935 to the Red Army's northward march and his defeatism and liquidationism in advocating withdrawal by the Red Army to the minority nationality areas on the Sichuan-Sikeng borders. What is more, he openly carried out traitorous activities against the party and the Central Committee, established his own bogus Central Committee, disrupted the unity of the party and the Red Army, and caused heavy losses to the Fourth Front Army of the Red Army. But thanks to patient education by Comrade Mao Zedong and the Central Committee, the Fourth Front Army and its numerous cotters soon returned to the correct leadership of the Central Committee of the party and played a glorious role in subsequent struggles. Chang Kuo-tao, however, proved incorrigible, and in the spring of 1938 he slipped out of the Shenzi-Kansu-Ningxia border region and joined the Kuomintang secret police. 6. CJV Stalin, Report to the 18th Congress of the CPSU, b. On the work of the Central Committee, Problems of Leninism, ENG ed., FLPH, Moscow, 1954, pages 784-86. 7. Boycotting Japanese goods was a method of struggle frequently used by the Chinese people against Japanese imperialist aggression in the first half of the 20th century, as in the patriotic May 4 movement of 1919, after the September 18 incident of 1931, and during the War of Resistance against Japan. Transcription by the Maoist Documentation Project. HTML revised 2004 by Marxists.org. Selected works of Mao Zedong.